Well, the Morrison government will today signal a switch in economic strategy. Once JobKeeper is gone, any state that slams shut its borders due to a COVID outbreak will have to stand on its own 2 feet. What does that mean? There'll be no financial help, no bailouts.
What Aglaus Berejiklian has shown so effectively through this crisis is that even when you have outbreaks, like in the Northern Beaches, you don't have to have a statewide lockdown.
Within months, Victoria was pleading for more assistance after the state was again plunged into lockdown.
The answer from the Prime Minister and from the Treasurer has been no.
The government argued it wasn't its responsibility to pay for what was initially a 1-week lockdown.
I note that the Queensland government and the Western Australian governments, when they were in similar circumstances, took on those responsibilities, having decided to go into those lockdowns.
Well, the pandemic's not over, and neither is the support from the Morrison government.
When the lockdown extended into a second week, the government softened its stance and brought in $500 cash payments for those left out of pocket.
Business owners and workers are holding their breath as we wait anxiously for a rescue package to come from the New South Wales and federal governments.
With no end in sight to Sydney's lockdown, the government today announced cash boosts for households and businesses, but stressed that the rules have changed for every state.
What I'm announcing today is not just a partnership with New South Wales. What I'm announcing today is an upgrading of the Commonwealth Government's national response.
And the Treasurer Josh Frydenberg joins me now live from Melbourne. Treasurer, thanks for joining us tonight. The May budget assumed there would be no more extended lockdowns. The PM has today conceded that the largest economy in the country will be in an extended lockdown. What's going to be the economic impact?
Look, it will be significant. Obviously, you get border closures, you get supply chains disruptions, you get investment decisions that are delayed, and when you get a state or parts of a state that are in lockdown, you get workers who can't turn up at the office or turn up to their normal vocation. This will have a significant impact on the economy, and Treasury expect that the New South Wales lockdown is costing about $700 million a week.
What will it mean in terms of job growth, in terms of employment growth figures, though?
Well, we're getting some job numbers later this week. That won't take into account what's happened in New South Wales, Laura, but it will take into account what happened in Victoria with their shorter 2-week lockdown. But the Australian economy, both in terms of economic growth but also in terms of the labour market outcomes, has surprised on the upside. We've seen unemployment go down to 5.1%, which is where it was last February. And Australia,
well, we've heard those figures
any
before,
advanced
Treasurer.
Economies.
We've heard those figures before.
Figures, Laura.
Yes, they are important figures, but if the biggest part of the economy is about to go into lockdown for a long period of time, the question is, what impact is it going to have on growth?
Well, no one's dismissing the significant impact it will have on confidence, on investment, and then in terms of growth and even potentially labour market outcomes. But we'll just have to wait and see. As you did say in your introduction, we anticipated in the budget that there would be further outbreaks and further lockdowns, but not of the lengthy duration we're now seeing in New South Wales. But we've responded today with a very significant support package in partnership with New South Wales. It's both a cash flow boost, which directly supports businesses based on the size of their payroll, as well as extending the individual payments to households, to workers, to $600 a week or to $375 a week, depending on the number of hours a week that has been lost.
And the trend in the infection numbers in New South Wales is really terrible. Do these measures take account of the fact that the New South Wales economy may go into an even bigger lockdown, a more fulsome lockdown?
Well, these measures are in place for as long as those extended restrictions remain, and I'm talking particularly about the designated hotspot areas that the Commonwealth has maintained. When it was in Victoria, we designated some areas that were hotspot areas, and so too we've done that in New South Wales, and our individual payments are based on those designated hotspot areas. So hopefully the New South Wales health authorities can get on top of this outbreak as soon as possible, but it does look like it's very challenging.
But if the economy is put into effectively hibernation, we're back to where we were at the beginning of the pandemic when we had JobKeeper and a whole range of other supports, including things like rent relief. But the New South Wales economy will not be getting that support this time round.
Well, I think the economy is in a very different position than it was last year when we did announce JobKeeper, which of course was a nationwide program. The measures that we've announced today are more targeted in the sense that they distinguish between states, they distinguish within states in terms of designated hotspot areas, as well as, depending on the size of the business, the amount of support to flow to them will be different. When we announced JobKeeper last year, Laura, Treasury had told me that the national unemployment rate could reach as high as 15% with more than 2 million people unemployed. Today it's at 5.1% and it's come down even with the end of JobKeeper. So we've transitioned to a different phase.
Well, we may have, but whose fault is this lockdown? You blamed Victoria and said the Victorian government had to take responsibility for the lockdowns there. Is this the New South Wales government's fault?
Well, as you know, you had a limo driver in New South Wales that was carrying international crew and did not have a mask, and that shouldn't have occurred. The New South Wales government has accepted that and they've changed the public health orders as a result, but that definitely should not have occurred. With respect to Victoria, it was a very different situation last year. They weren't obviously dealing with the Delta variant. They had a massive quarantine failure. Then they had an inquiry that didn't find that anyone took responsibility
New South Wales
or made the decision.
New South Wales is dealing with the Delta variant, which is much harder to deal with. If the lockdown is extended because New South Wales didn't lock down harder earlier, isn't it? It's the fault of the state government, isn't it?
Well, they're going to take their medical advice as to the nature of those restrictions, and as you know, they may take further decisions in the coming weeks, depending on how successful they are in containing and contact testing and tracing this outbreak as it occurs. They're decisions that they will take, but of course the New South Wales government has done very well to date in managing the virus. I mean, if you look at the national average of the number of days lost to lockdown outside of Victoria, if you take out the first initial lockdown, it's only around 11 days. In Victoria, it's 149 days.
Treasurer, Premier Andrews has said tonight that your government's refusal to provide more assistance to the state was a disgrace. Do the apparent double standards reflect the government's concern it may lose seats in New South Wales?
Well, that's a very cynical question, and the statement from Daniel Andrews, people are sick of his whinging and his politicking of the crisis. I mean, the reality is that any time anyone challenges Daniel Andrews, including your colleague Lee Sales, you get the bots and the trots starting to troll her out of Trades Hall on social media. The reality is this. We have provided more support on a per capita basis to Victoria through JobKeeper than any other state. Victoria was offered a 50-50 split and they decided to reject that. The payments to New South Wales for the first 2 weeks that was experienced with the same lockdown in Victoria were exactly the same, and now we've put in place a system with New South Wales that can be extended and expanded to other states should they incur a lengthy lockdown.
Aren't the current low vaccination rates a key reason New South Wales is facing an extended lockdown? And would you describe the vaccine rollout as a success?
Well, the vaccine rollout has been very challenging. There are some things we can control and there are some things we can't control, like the ATAGI advice around the AstraZeneca vaccine and the cohorts that it would be available to. I mean, I think the fact is that Australia on the health front has avoided the fate of so many other nations. The average loss of life, Laura, across the OECD has been 30,000. Australia's had tragically but less than 1,000 a life.
But were you too slow to adjust those vaccine options? Should you have been talking to Pfizer globally?
Well, we have been seeking to get as many vaccines as possible. The good news is that we, as I understand it, will be getting 1 million vaccines a week from Pfizer in a short period of time. We've already seen 9.3 million doses being delivered and distributed. We're focused on the more vulnerable cohorts like the over 70s, where more than 70% have received their first dose. More than a third of the eligible population have received their first dose. More vaccines are becoming available. General Fruin is overseeing the rollout, and I'm confident that it will gather pace.
Treasurer, we're out of time, but thank you for your time tonight.
All my best. All the best. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 7:30's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.